Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
Today we're going to talk tomatoes.
And there's also blossom end rot. Irregular watering cycles that can cause blossom end rot. It's also a calcium deficiency that can cause blossom end rot. And we are very prone to calcium deficiency in our area, despite the fact that our ground is made a half out of limestone.
It is.
But the calcium is there, but it's not available to the plants. So I always look for, Granadero, low susceptibility to blossom end rot. That's one of the things I look for all the time. Bella Rosa will continue to set fruit once temperatures warm in early summer. Okay?
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal here. Will perform better in heat than most varieties. Invincible, determinate tomato with exceptional fruit set in hot conditions. So if your tomato can survive in Georgia and Florida and places like that, I'm going to try it because things that I grew as a kid up in New England frequently have really lousy production here. They can't take the heat. But you look at like Invincible, the disease tolerance is tomatoes mosaic virus, verticillium wilt, fusarium, anthracnose, late blight, gray leaf spot, and bacterial wilt. Now some of those things are in the soil. And once your area, the soil can be infected by dirty seeds. So if you get your seeds off of Etsy or in a swap from somebody,
you don't know what you're getting.
You don't know what you're getting. And that's one of the reasons I won't do seed swaps in general, not for fruits and vegetables. I don't mind growing the resistant varieties, but I just don't want to add to my existing problems. There's a couple of university sources that have really good pictures, up close digital pictures that you can blow up. I'm finding that a bunch of the books that I have, which are considered to be very good resources and have pictures that were good for the time in which they were taken, are not specific enough. I mean, I look at something wrong with my beans and I'm like, well, that looks like these 8 diseases. That's not helpful.
Well, an awful lot of the tomato diseases look alike in the typical picture.
Yeah.
So you have to do other tests in order to determine what's actually causing the problem.
Right. If I had easy access to a compliant university system, because there are states where you have easy access to a compliant university system, and for free or very small money, they will be glad to put some grad school or some research assistant to work in the lab testing your stuff to find out what the fungus or what the bacterial wilt is or whatever the heck it is.
So we have determined tomatoes, which mostly are going to be of a certain size and a certain plant shape.
Right.
And a lot of times those determined tomatoes will come off all at one time or nearly all at one time.
Right. It depends on the version. I was always told they came off all at one time because they were developed for commercial production. But I'm finding that that's not always true anymore because they have also recognized the fact that mere human mortals who live in houses and condos and all that kind of stuff might want a tomato, and they may not call it a pot tomato, but they'll call it something that is determinate because it doesn't grow 18 feet tall and require massive trellising. But even determinate tomatoes can grow different heights. For instance, we found the Wisconsin 55 to be pretty short. The Bella Rosa is sort of a intermediate height. There are some determinants that can be quite tall. And I remember Haas Tools doing some stuff with that where they would say, well, these are determinate and so are these. These are determinate and so are these. But it seemed like the different varieties were producing, you could get away with a 3-foot trellis for this one, but you needed a 5-foot trellis for that one.
Yeah, so an awful lot of tomatoes were and have been bred not for their flavor. It's been bred for their ability to be shipped and, more importantly, to be automatically picked by machinery.
Right.
Now, we used to live in the area where tomatoes and artichokes and cauliflower and cabbage, Brussels sprouts were all grown, and you would see these huge semi-tractor trailers full of tomatoes. Some of the tomatoes would be ripe-ish, and some would be green.
right? But those tomatoes are going for sauce.
Exactly.
The good quality tomatoes that you see that come to the stores that are packed in little cup sort of depressions and stuff like that, those are all hand-picked. Those are lots of little hands out in that field working their butts off in the sun. So that's how we chose our stuff, is that we look at disease resistance. And what you have to look at is what you have where you are. In addition to disease resistance, I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, well, they didn't have many, Al was saying, he didn't have many bugs this year. And usually he has a lot of trouble with tomato hornworms. We didn't have tomato hornworms early at all. We didn't. Only at the very end of the summer did we have any. And usually somewhere in June we get hit by this flush of nasty stuff. But I didn't see any of the big moths that make the tomato hornworms early this year. They came in late for some reason, and I'm not sure why. It has to do, I'm sure, that with their eggs and stuff being killed off or eaten. We did have a lot of flycatchers around this spring, so maybe that helped a little bit. They can eat all the bugs they want to do. That's what we did for tomatoes this year. What will I change for next year? Oh, I did want to bring up one thing. A lot of times when you're a new grower and you're trying a new variety, and you really don't know what to choose. When we lived in Massachusetts, we used to get the Burpee catalog, and it would give us a recommendation for whatever thing it was, a variety for whatever type of plant it was. So if I was growing bush beans for the first time, they would say, this is the type of bush bean you should grow. We recommend for your area. And we did. And it worked like a charm. Now, when we moved here, it did not work as well because we're such a weird area.
Well, weird weather environment at least.
Weird weather, difficult soil.
No soil.
No soil. Our friend that we were talking to this past, he says he's on bedrock. He built his beds because there's nothing there but bedrock. Where the reason you put raised beds in is because there's no good soil. It's basically rock dust and has no organics in it. And rock dust is hydrophobic, which means it repels water, and it doesn't hold water well. So you'll be pouring gallons of water in there and your plant is dying of thirst because it's just scooting on by and the roots can only grab so much at a time. But if you are not using a Burpee catalog, or you find that Burpee's not reliable in your area, one of the tricks you can use is what they call AAS selections.
What's AAS selection stand for?
Stands for All America Selections. Not American, America, because the tests are done in the U.S. and Canada.
Ah.
It's a nonprofit organization, and they trial all kinds of veggies. I don't think they do anything besides veggies, all over North America. And then they choose what varieties seem to be most adaptable. We have used some of the AAS provider, our provider green beans are AAS. And wow, stellar. They produce buckets and buckets and buckets of green beans. I can't imagine what they would do if it was a nicer environment to work with. But when I'm trying a new thing, if I'm not sure what to do, I'll grab an AAS a lot of times. I will, unless there's something that just really pops out at me as catering to the kind of environment that we live in. But AAS tomatoes or peppers or anything else are chosen because no matter what terrible things you do to them, they're highly likely to survive and produce well. A sidebar about the greenhouse. We wound up with 14 different tomato plants out there that survived. Early on we had some problems. And we lost one plant, and I don't remember who it was. And it wasn't clear from the...
Yeah, I really abused those starts badly. There were other things that had to be done first. Yeah. So I got those things done, got the new system going.
Right. Once the new system...
They were okay.
Yeah, once the new system was going well, but we had at least one plant in there that didn't make it. So I wound up with 14 plants in the greenhouse. I did not, again, want as many of some as I...
Definitely didn't want as many Gardener's Delight.
No. Well, in the long run, it's worked out pretty well because we're getting like buckets of Gardener's Delight, and it's all going to turn into sauce if we can't eat it all, which is fine, but I would have preferred to have had more in the way of paste and stuff. We had a fail early on with our granaderos, so we didn't have a lot of spare ones.
Yeah, that was in terms of the starts that we had.
Right, in terms of the starts. So we only wound up with one granadero, which is a paste tomato in the greenhouse. And I wound up with 2 big beef. Now, they have been absolutely awesome. They have produced solid. Now, if you go out there right now and look at the plants look awful.
Well, the grow tips are looking good.
The grow tips are looking better, but the plants in general look crappy. They've got some fungus, and they've got some this, and they've got some that. And you know what? I don't care. They're still producing. This is not a Better Homes and Gardens showcase of what my tomatoes look like. What I care about is I am still on a daily basis picking ripe tomatoes or close to ripe tomatoes that I can sit in the kitchen, and the ones that are completely ripe and we don't have any use for them go into the freezer. The ones that are almost ripe go right where you see them on the counter, and then they become a tomato sandwich when they're not looking. There's going to be a couple that had a couple of spots on them that are going to become seeds because they are OPs. But we have 4 Gardener's Delight, 1 Granadero, 2 Big Beef, 1 Wisconsin 55, and 6 Amanda Orange. I actually noticed that one of the Gardener's Delight plants has managed to set a couple of new fruits recently, despite everything. But they I think will be wrapping it up soon. I mean, I'm really happy that we're still getting a regular supply of fresh tomatoes that are delicious.
Yeah, my goal is to get the Dutch bucket system where we're growing all these tomatoes to survive so that we can have at least ripened tomatoes on the peninsula of our kitchen for Thanksgiving. I don't know if we'll make it or not. It looks like we might.
We're going to probably stick with what we grew this year. I won't promise you that I won't throw in some random tomato, because that's actually how I found Grand Marshal this year.
I'll almost guarantee that we'll plant at least one new variety next year. I have no idea what it is because
I don't either.
It's going to be interesting.
If you have specific questions about tomatoes, varieties that we've tried before, or what do we think about particular varieties you might be looking at, let us know, because we have tried an awful lot. So I've been watching our videos to see what you've been doing, because usually when you're doing the battery stuff, I'm off doing something else. I see the cells. I see you attaching them together with bus bars. So how do you turn that into a 12-volt battery?
Yeah, okay. It's really pretty simple. What we do, and what I'm in the process of doing right now, is we connect all those individual cells up. We have a negative post, a negative connection on each cell, and there's a positive connection on each cell. What I do is I go from the positive of one cell to the negative of the next cell. Then I go to the other side, and I go from the positive of that cell to the negative of the other. So I'll show you in a little diagram exactly how that works.
Right. Now, is there any way to increase the capacity of the batteries? You were talking about how much each holds, but like the numbers you were giving were lower than what it says on the outside of the battery?
Yeah, well, the way that you turn the battery into both voltage and current. Remember when I was showing in the video a few days ago that each cell was putting out 2.9 volts, and we added them all up, and that gave us about 12 volts of voltage. Well, the question is, how do you get usable capacity? Well, that's 100 amp hours, which is about 1.2 kilowatt hours of energy stored in those 4 little cells. The way you get more capacity is we go from using a serial connection that we use for those 4 cells to turn out 12 volts, and we add another set of 4 cells next to it, and we hook them up in parallel. You just line the car batteries up side by side, all the negatives on one side and all the positives on the other side, and you connect negative to negative, negative to negative, negative to negative, positive to positive, 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 all the way down. And at the end, if you had 100 amp hours in each of those batteries, you end up with 6 times that 100 amp hours, so you end up with 600 amp hours. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, it just gives you, however many buckets you have to keep electrons in, basically.
Yeah.
Instead of 4, you have 8 buckets.
Instead of having one 2,500 gallon cistern of water, you have 2 2,500
Right.
2,500 gallon.
It's just a storage bucket.
That's all it is.
Okay.
So now tomorrow in the next installment of how we're building that 12-volt lithium battery, I'll be going over the chemistry of the battery a little bit, just enough to understand more about what's going on.
Right.
But more importantly, I'll be talking about the battery monitoring system.
That was that little board that you showed us the other day.
That was a little board. Now, I'll go over that board in some detail, but the reason why that's important is because lithium batteries are different than lead-acid batteries.
Right.
It's, in many cases, in many ways, more resilient than lead-acid batteries. It accepts more current. It can be charged faster,
right, yeah.
and it can be discharged faster, which means that you have more ability to make things happen.
Right.
The problem, though, is you don't want to be trying to charge that battery when it's frozen. And you don't want to be charging the battery when it's over a certain temperature.
Right, yeah, they're more temperature sensitive than lead acid batteries are.
That's right. In fact, if you try to charge them when it's below 30 degrees or thereabouts, you can actually cause the cell to crack and break, and now you can have all other kinds of problems.
Yeah, that would be the end of that toast, I'm sure.
It would be. So we'll go
And that's why one of the reasons we keep our utility building above freezing.
Yeah, so
One of the reasons.
now for our solar power system out in the utility building, I didn't build those batteries. I bought those batteries fully assembled. I could have built exactly those same batteries for about a quarter of what we paid for those batteries. The reason why I did that was twofold. One is it's a commercially available unit. Nobody needs to know how it works inside.
It's a black box
It's a black box.
with terminals on it that say positive and negative.
And if for some reason I'm not around, whether it's temporarily or permanently, you or somebody else can come in and service that. And if you need to replace one of those batteries,
You just buy another one off the shelf.
that's right. And there's a very standard process to do what they call commissioning the battery.
Right.
It's all very simple. Now, something that I build, I'm willing to build this system for your business going out to the various events that we go to, because we need a lot more battery capacity than we have right now. Right now, that battery is a killer. It weighs about 70 pounds.
It's rough. We put it on a little cart and we roll it in. We try and tuck it under a table. You always bark your knuckles because I know I've stuck it under there a bunch of times myself.
Using the new battery pack that I'm busy building, we'll be able to fully charge those batteries in about 2 hours, unlike the one we've been using where it takes 20 hours to charge it.
That's our cell phones. That's my credit card processing. That's if we're going to do any kind of videos or anything, that's where we get the juice from. Because most of the events that we go to do not have electrical power for anybody but the food merchants.
We'll be able to use that battery pack even if it freezes outside. We can use the battery pack, that is, we can discharge it. We can actually hook things up to it and it'll work just fine. We can also use it if it gets over the charging temperature. So if, let's suppose that the battery pack is only supposed to be charged if it's below 105 degrees. Well, we will get over 105 degrees at some of these events. That's why I'm busy doing this. I'm getting old. I hate carrying that 70-pound battery around. And a lot of times it does mean because the dirt's muddy or because of other reasons I can't roll the battery on the cart. I hand carry it, which is fine. But, you know, when you get older and you're having to move things around that way,
Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because obviously we have lots going on. So until next time, bye.
keep brainstorming.
Because obviously we are.